Why? Because that's who we are. That's what we do. We go with the crowd. Until somebody, person you talked about, until somebody says, wait a minute, this person's hurt. In fact, when people teach CPR, often they include advice to people that if you have that, if you're in that circumstance, if you have a heart attack, you have to point to someone and say, you, in the blue jacket, call 911, I need help. And assign that person responsibility. Why? Because if you don't, they keep right on walking.
Oh, we'll stand there and stare at you.
Oh, yes. Yeah, right. And then when one person does it, what happens? Everybody else. Exactly. Oh, good, good. So, we don't stand out. We don't like to do that. There are phrases for this in the sociology world, like group ignorance. So let's talk about power. There are 5 kinds. One, it's called legitimate power. You know what that is? I have the job, you work for me, you will do what I tell you. That's legitimate power. 2, reward. I can give you something you want. This is in a kind of a transactional thing, okay? You do something the way I want you to do, and then I will give. We do it with kids, right? And their sponsors, and their bosses, and anybody else we can get a hold of. The problem with reward is that there's a satiation level, okay? You can only go so far with reward, and then the response goes like that. Third one is punishment. And you know what happens with punishment? As soon as you stop, as soon as the threat goes away, the behavior that you're looking for ceases. So far, not so good, right? Legitimate power works as long as you're in the workplace. As soon as you don't have that job anymore, your authority disappears. Next is referent power. Do something because you like that person. Okay? Does that work? A lot, actually. And then there is expert. This is the one that really works. I'm in a burning building, and I see a man in a fireman's suit. What am I going to do? Whatever he tells me. Right? Why? Because I figure he knows what he's talking about. You can combine expert with some of these others, for good or ill. I certainly wouldn't use this one. Scratch that out. This one, half scratch. This one's not too bad. We do it all the time. Right? You give somebody a responsibility because they work for you. That's all. Which one of these is consistent with leadership? Or which of those is consistent with leadership?
Probably the referent in a lot of ways.
Okay.
If it's about the relationships.
Okay. Yep. Anybody hear about charismatic leaders? Right? Jim Jones didn't force anybody to go to Vienna, drink the Kool-Aid. But 900 and some people did. Why? Because he had referent power. They thought he knew what he was doing, and not quite expert, but just like him. What about expert power? Is that part of leadership?
Sure.
How so?
Well, I mean, in theory, leaders should know what they're doing, should have competency in their area,
Right.
which will foster respect and compliance.
And when you find out that they don't know what they're doing, what happens?
Betrayal.
Bingo.
And they don't have that power anymore.
Right. Yep. There are 3 kinds of trust. As I'm making lists, I'll make another list. Communication trust. Contractual trust. And competence trust. So we begin to see how some of these things relate to each other. If I'm an expert, or if I'm perceived as an expert, then sometimes that's just as good. If I'm perceived as an expert, I have to have a level of competence trust from you, don't I? If I walk into a position in the IT department, and I don't know what Ethernet means, I'm not going to be a leader anywhere near there. Contractual trust is, I will do what I say. I will do the thing that I have committed to do. Communication trust is very simple. I will tell the truth. The whole truth. And probably not much other. So these are trust things. And these are power. And there is a relationship. What kind of power you use, and in a sense, how you use it and to what effect. Not forgetting our old friend, consistency. So if I'm going to trust you to communicate correctly, honestly, openly with me, as soon as you are inconsistent in that regard, this goes away. Okay? What's that got to do with leadership? That's a question. It's not rhetorical. Maybe I didn't ask the right question. What does trust have to do with leadership?
It's a quality of leadership.
Okay?
It's really hard to get anybody to follow what they instruct.
Yep.
I think people, when they trust you, they will take a risk to bring you ideas
Okay.
out.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to have that trust there and feel that they can safely do that without penalty.
Thank you. You used the right word. Keep looking for these good words. If you're going to be a leader, people have to feel safe with you. And that really talks to all of those points. They have to feel safe that you know what you're doing. They have to feel safe that you will do what you say. This kind of gets back to the business about negotiation again, because without safety, the kinds of negotiation that you want to do can't be done. Yeah.
Well, I think also there's a kind of a direct correlation between trust and power, because the level of trust you have allows you or allows a person to influence the certain level, a level of power. So if somebody doesn't trust you,
Yeah.
you can have reward power because all they want is the paycheck.
Right.
Or you can have punishment power because that's what they expect of you. They don't trust you anyway. But if you have trust, then you can provide expert leadership or referent leadership. There's a direct correlation between the types of power that you can display and the level of trust.
Okay. Does that make sense to you guys? Good.
And I just want to say, I think the hardest part is when you are trying to lead people who are only after the reward. Because if they're only after the reward, then how do you exert your leadership to inspire and engage and empower?
Right. The Gallup people, speak to this for a minute. The Gallup people do a lot of research, And what they found is about a third of employees, global, are engaged in it. About half are not. That means they come to work, they go home, they get a check. What about the other fifth? What do you think there? This is only 4/5. More. Say more. Looking for more?
They want more responsibility.
Quite, but you're
Which
edging
is
towards it.
They want to be engaged. I'm sorry.
Yes.
It's a sixth, it's not a fifth.
Okay, then we'll make
I was waiting for
plus,
Sharon to say something.
I was thinking.
I
Sorry about
didn't
that.
speak up.
Okay, good.
I guess my thought is like they want to be engaged, they're looking for engagement, but there are factors that are prohibiting that. So in other words.
In a way.
Yeah.
You know what?
I think sometimes there are people that just come to work because they have to, that they really don't. Oh, that's
These are the chronically
Oh,
unhappy.
yeah. Oh, the chronically unhappy.
How do
Are
you
you sure
lead
it's
these
only
people?
half?
Well, I'm not so sure because the math could be all wrong.
Now we don't know. There's a whole trust thing with your math.
So if that's 30% and that's 50%, what is this?
20% is
The math isn't too
plus
far.
3 is 5.
So that's 1/3. So how do you lead people who feel this way about work? It's hard.
Depends on how good they are
How
how good they are at being disengaged. I'm sorry.
some are very,
Some
very
people are-
creative.
Some people, exactly, if they put the time into the work as they are, as much time and energy into that as they're doing to being disengaged, it would be
Right.
amazing.
Right. A number of years ago, I put an addition on a house, and I was talking to the building inspector, and he said if people just did the way it's supposed to be done, instead of trying to work around the rules, they'd save a lot of time. So we have actively and disengaged people. But what about this bunch? This is half. And they come to work. Now, how are you supposed to be a leader? How do you do that?
Find their passion.
Well, you do that by mentoring people? Do you do that by being articulate? Do you do it by engaging them in some way and empowering them? Do you do it by being willing to step up? Are these appropriate for leading those people who just simply come to work to get a check?
Do a lot of observing, a lot of listening. A lot of times, intelligent, capable people are just in the wrong place, in the wrong position. Perhaps their talents are being misused, and of no fault of anybody.
Okay.
It takes time to get to know somebody. You can't figure everything out through the hiring process.
Okay.
But
So it's knowing who they are. Okay. So let's attack this problem from a leadership point of view. Okay? You have these people to deal with. We'll center on them for now because they're the majority. Almost majority. Close to the majority. So get to know them. There's a book called Love 'Em or Let 'Em Go, something like that. Okay. I'm not sure I subscribe to all of it. But get to know them. What else? What are you going to do? You're leaders now. Let's put your leader hats on. What are you going to do with these people who just come to work? Yeah.
You need to help them understand how they fit into whatever you're trying to change, or what their role is and how much they're needed to help accomplish that.
Right, if they're buying.
And I think, if I understand understand where you're going, understand their value. Because when it speaks to people's motivation, it comes from the heart, it's not the head. So if there is a realization that they're valued because they bring a specific contribution, then there's a higher likelihood of engaging on the process.
What if we, instead of saying value, we said values? What are their values? Is that important?
It's important, and I would put that dash, get to know them, because in my opinion, part of getting to know them is knowing what is important to them, what makes them tick, what are their personal values and professional values.
Okay. What else?
I think we could, we spend so much time trying to correct people's faults rather than highlighting their strengths.
Okay.
And back to what you were saying, when you're putting square pegs into round holes, and it's just not working. You put the round pegs in round holes and the square pegs in square pegs.
Yeah. There are philosophies of education around that that says, you know, after students, public school students, get certain basic skills like reading and stuff like that in hand, that you don't force them to do things that they do well. You concentrate on the things that they really do well. Okay, so at work that might be okay. This is hard though. I mean, this is a lot of work.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What else? Yes, you had an expectant look on your. Yeah. Okay. You're done. You're done. What else? What else are you going to do with these people?
Get them away from the actively disengaged. I don't mean that with sassiness. I guess part of me does. Those of you who know me, I get a little sassy. But you know, those actively disengaged people, I call them life suckers. Because what happens is those people who are teetering on that border of, I'd like to be able to do this, I just need that extra push. You get that 20% any higher, and you've got a problem.
Right, because they will drag everything. Okay. All right, so maybe one of the things that you do as a leader is you get rid of people.
But doesn't a lot of the literature on organizational management say that you get rid of those, that somebody else will turn into that person? Isn't there some
Well,
of
you
that in the
keep
literature?
shifting the
Yeah.
requirements. Yeah.
You're going to have to face it one way or another.
There's always going to be people who are stronger.
Right. And David, wasn't it Jack Welch who had the 10% at the top and the 80%?
Called the vitality curve.
Right.
10% go away every year.
Right. Or you make them go. You made 40,000 people go. Okay, so we can get rid of them. We can work to their strengths. We can see them for who they are and help them to become better, right? Because we had here things like helping them grow and make them the best they can be. That'll make a list too. You can mentor them. What if you don't have this?
Get another job.
Get another job.
What if you as the leader doesn't have that? Are you asking?
Or what if they don't?
I don't know. Is this infectious?
Yeah.
Very much so.
Okay.
Well, with the passion comes the trust. Your trust shows through. You're building trust with those disengaged
Mhm.
workers.
Mhm.
They can see that passion in you, so they begin to trust you, to believe you.
And they get excited?
Absolutely, and then they're getting
Good.
I would actually say, if you go back to the next page, but just to refer to, one of the things we're thinking as leaders is that we are the only ones with the solution. When I would, the page after that.
Sure.
And what I would say is that 30% who are engaged,
Right?
leverage those individuals. So passion comes from peers in many cases. So you have somebody sitting in the same room working on a project, and there's one individual who is the peer who is so super jazzed about something, and that's a peer-to-peer relationship versus someone in the leadership role trying to move someone down that path, that's a very important group to get involved in those non-engaged folks.
So not only find your own passion, but find the passions that other people have and use them. Okay, is that putting words in your mouth? But
Oh, it sounds lovely.
it's good.
Sounds good.
Yeah, oh my God, it's inspiring. Okay, Kelly, what?
I think that the trust thing has to go both ways though. So
Okay.
it's one thing as leaders, we want people to trust us, but we too have to trust our staff. Or those that are colleagues, or anybody that I mean, as a leader, we're not necessarily managing or supervising folks, but we may be part of a group. And we have to trust them as much as we want them to trust us before anything can happen.
Okay. Do you sense that from the people you work for?
Please make sure to fill out an evaluation.
Well, the answer is yes, we can. So, are we supposed to for a couple of things? One is they feel passionate. One is they feel passionate. And sufficiently passionate that they step out. They either have or they get expertise. And they're vulnerable. Here's the tricky part. And this is part of the trust thing, is being vulnerable to new ideas, to people who want to do something a little differently than you want them to do, but you're willing to say, okay. It also helps you say, I'm sorry, or I screwed that up, or something like that. So I think there is a real case to be made for vulnerability. And that should fit with your general way of doing things anyway, right? The relationship thing. Eventually, at some point, there's a vulnerability in there for one or both parties. These are people who communicate. And they do so minding the gap. Do you remember, did we talk about that? Yeah, we did. Anybody been to London? Okay. Were you in the tube? Okay. Didn't go down the subway? Big red and white signs in the tube that say, mind the gap. Okay? And they're talking about the gap between the train and the platform. Be careful. Watch out. But this is, I've borrowed this. I stole it. From them to use as a psychological thing. So let's say that you are here and your employee is here. How much communication is going to occur? Mostly it'll be do this, do that. But what if you mind the gap? And you move yourself, still in a supervisory role, but you mind the gap and you come down and say, look, let's talk about this for a while. And these are the reasons why this needs to be done. And I'd like to get your input once you get started to see if there's some ways to improve. How much communication now? A lot more, right? So, mind the gap. Pay attention to that psychological gap, the positional gap, if you will, between you and the other person. Do you ever disagree with a significant other about which movie to see? Oh, okay, that's a bad example. Nobody's ever done it. That's another situation where you might want to mind the gap. And you mind the gap in such a way that sometimes this is you, and sometimes this is you. We share, okay, what we're going to do and how we're going to do this. And that's the nature of a nice relationship. So keep that in mind. So what are we communicating? We're communicating this vision. Well, you don't get to decide because of your position where the community college is going to go or by what means.
Christina does.
Well, there's that part of it. Okay. But is it your responsibility as a member of the leadership group, team, whatever, to share the vision as you understand it? Sure it is. How do you do that? Do you say, here's a bunch of papers, go make copies? Or, and you don't have to go into some long, diatribe about, you're making copies because, the world would be better if you do. But the person who has the responsibility for doing that work should, because of your communication, have an idea of why it's important. So it gets back to the business about the value of people, right? Communication is two parts, or as people are fond to say, we have one mouth and 2 ears, for a good reason. So there's a lot of listening. Great leaders listen real hard to what's going on. What was the movie about the guys who discovered the housing collapse was coming? What was that movie? I can't remember. Anyway, Jeremy Irons was the CEO of the corporation, and he was talking to these people because they found this terrible problem was going to happen. The world was going to come to an end, and the company was going to collapse. And he said, "I'm here for one reason." He said, "Because I know one thing." He said, "I can tell the future." Well, he said that after listening to what everybody had to say. So listening, there are different kinds of listening, and what I subscribe to is a thing called active listening. And there is a way to discover whether you're actually doing it or not. Active listening, the way I see it, is you are not forming a response until the person has finished speaking. You've heard this before in other contexts, I think. Because, why? Who knows why we do this?
Forming your response, you're not listening.
You're not listening, but why is it important to hear it all the way to the end?
You might change your mind.
You might decide that it really isn't what you want to do after all. But the real reason is that about 80 to 90%, I'll make sure my numbers are right, is filler. You think about how you speak. Blah, 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 yak, and this is what I want to do. The good stuff is in the last 10 to 20%. And if you don't wait, if you're already forming a response, you miss it.
I have a question. Are women better at listening than men?
What? I don't know. I really don't know. And I'm not certainly going to hazard a guess. There was a handout here. It's 4 pages. The Debbie Tannen stuff. This is as clearly stated as anywhere else I've ever seen. And at the risk of boring you a little bit, I'm going to read one to you. I'm going to start right at the beginning. You got it? A married couple was in a car when the wife turned to her husband and asked, "Would you like to stop for coffee?" "No, thanks," he answered truthfully, so they didn't stop. The result? The wife, who indeed wanted to stop, became annoyed because she felt her preference had not been considered. Hello? Do we know this? The husband, seeing his wife was angry, became frustrated. "Well, what's wrong, dear?" I can hear him say it. "Why didn't she just say what she wanted?" That's what he wants to know. Unfortunately, he failed to see that his wife was asking the question not to get an instant decision, but to begin a negotiation. And the woman didn't realize that when her husband said no, he was just expressing his preference, not making a ruling. When a man and a woman interpret the same interchange in such conflicting ways, it's no wonder they can find themselves leveling angry charges of selfishness and obstinacy to each other. So, sounds familiar, doesn't it? Would you like to go to a movie? No. Wait a minute, I want to go to a movie. Sorry, why didn't you say so? So, how do men and women communicate differently? This does not to get to your hearing question, but maybe it does. Women talk to relate. Men talk to commit or to communicate facts. Okay? You want to go to a movie? No. Fact. Easy. Right? Not, oh, I know too. Thought about that. Would you like to go to a movie? You don't hear that from men. You don't have to be so emphatic. She said, no, we don't. So the title of this thing, if you look at the top of the front page, it says, "Can't we talk?" Well, the answer is, yes, we can. So, are we surprised when these things happen at work? Are we surprised when we miscommunicate because we don't understand what the other is really trying to do? And it's, as Tannen says, this is not to lump everybody into one camp or the other, but the tendencies are very strong. Your reaction to this little story is sufficient proof of that. So let's see. There was another one here that I thought was interesting. Well, on page 2, there's a heading: Advice versus Understanding. You can read that. I think it's good. What is the other one? Oh, I'm sorry. Page 3. Information versus feeling. A cartoon shows a husband opening a newspaper and asking his wife, "Is there anything you'd like to say to me before I start reading the paper?" We know there isn't, but that as soon as the man begins reading, his wife will think of something. Oh, we've never had this before. The cartoon is funny because people recognize their own experience in it. What's not funny is that many women are hurt when men don't talk to them at home, and many men are frustrated when they disappoint their partners without knowing why. Men don't get it. Well, women don't get it either. But we talk past each other all the time. This happens at work. This happens when you try to lead people. So when you're leading men and or women, it's important to understand what it is not only that you're saying, but what they're hearing. You might want to talk to, those of you who are women, might want to talk to a man in a work situation and talk, communicate new responsibilities, or there's a problem, or something's going on, and so you start to talk to this fellow, and he gets confused. What are the facts? What am I supposed to do? How can I solve this problem? What do I attack? You may not like this, but somebody gave this to me. Here's a store. And in the store, there are several departments. And this is where the socks are. Don't be neat. But this was the picture of the woman going through the socks. And this is the picture of the man going through the socks. Yes, I'm going on a Target run. What does that mean? I'm going to go over and see what's there. Maybe there are possibilities. Maybe I'll buy something. Maybe I won't. When I go to Target, I'm getting socks. That's what I do, right? Why? Women were the gatherers, in prehistoric times. Women were the gatherers. They stayed in the camps, and they took care of the children, and they made sure everything was okay. What did the men do? They go out and hunt something. Well, okay, so maybe we're biologically disposed to that. So when you talk to people, keep in mind what it is they really hear. Then hear facts. Then hear problems. A couple of stories I can relate to in my own experience, where someone said to me, "Oh, I think there's a squeak in that door. I'll fix it." Okay, I say dutifully. So what do? I go in the basement, I get some stuff, tools, yeah, do. No squeak. She didn't want to talk about a squeak. She just thought there was a squeak in the door. But she wanted to talk about something else. How did I know? Does this have anything to do with leadership? Sure it does. Because until we have a clear understanding of who it is we're dealing with and who we are, we can't really lead very well. So, let's get back to our...
I don't know if you're going to go there, but can I do a sidebar for just a minute?
Absolutely.
Go back to your page there, because one of the things that comes, and we'll talk about this McKinsey study later, but one of the things that comes out of that is the senior executives in the top-ranked companies that are trying to get more women into the senior management ranks, the CEO ranks, say, why don't they come talk to me?
Right.
Why don't they step up? Why don't they have relationships within the other senior managements? What's causing that? How would you reply to that? This goes back to communication and relationships, but what's different about the way many women, not all women, form relationships? And how does that apply to work, good or poorly? Because it does. This is an article and research is done by women, so I'm not making this up as a man, although I only have daughters, so I see it. How do women typically form relationships? What kind of relationships do most women have?
Social.
What's that mean? Starts off with you have a relationship with your kids and sisters. What kind of relationship do they have with their sisters? What kind of relationship do they have with their friends?
They're very personal.
It's personal.
Everything's personal in the work environment. And I would say many women that maybe might express an interest in wanting to do something feel like they're not liked enough because they haven't developed that personal relationship with the individuals that make those decisions, so they can't go straight and ask for it. They have to feel like they're accepted and liked before they feel comfortable enough to step up.
And how do your relationships have to change as you start moving up? Can you have best friends if you have 5 layers reporting to you?
No.
Well, I think as long as we're talking about things that drive us nuts about our spouses.
Wait.
But I think there might be a parallel here. You know, why doesn't she come and talk to me? One thing that makes me insane is my husband will never ask me how my day was. And as I've thought about this, I need an invitation, you know, and we've talked about this since, like, if you want to tell me about your day, just tell me about your day.
Oh, man, have I heard that before?
That's not how I was raised. That's
Right.
not what I, as a woman, tend to do, is to just, like, impose my day upon people, you know.
Right.
So I think that's probably another issue with why doesn't she come and talk to me? She's waiting for an invitation. you
Yes,
know.
right. And in David's question, let's take 2 scenes. The CEO is a man who wants to increase the level of women participation in management. And here's the CEO who's a woman who wants to do the same thing. What's different here? How's he going to do it? Well, we have a problem to solve. We're going to fix this. You know, we'll hire more women. Hey.
Isn't they get a binder of women?
Huh?
And yet, curiously enough, you know where you get the best odds of getting promoted?
Yes.
Working for a man.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why is that? Do we know that? Do we know why that is, Dan?
You ever watch the movie Lindsay Lohan and Mean Girls?
No. That was an argument I won.
Seriously, seriously.
And I think it comes from this thought that there's only so much real estate where women can be in those roles, and so it becomes you take it to the personal level and say we can all, instead of saying we can share this and all have this ability, it becomes a threat. And I don't know where that stems from, but that clearly is what happens. It becomes personal. It becomes we can't both do this. It has to be one or the other.
The research says women get promoted for the same reason that men do. Because they get things done. People like to work for them because they make a difference. That doesn't change a whole lot. How they get promoted has a lot to do with the company they're in and their ability to be adaptable. What they do once they're in the position has a lot to do with generational differences and individual differences. But at the end of the day, people get promoted because of what they do for their business. And that's not for-profit, not-for-profit. It's not generic to business. It happens in the educational world. But that step, there are layers where the steps are difficult. They're difficult for men, too. That step of these people can't be best friends anymore. Is much harder for women than it is for men, but men have the same problem. This step of going from vice president to senior vice president, you need to have, at that stage in most businesses and nonprofits, you need to have contacts outside of your organization that can help your organization. For many men that come from relationship cultures, countries, women that come from best friends relationships, it's hard to think out. It's not comfortable. I don't want to go to association meetings. I'm busy. I've got family life. I don't want to go out in the evening and hang out with people from this company or that company. And yet, if you don't do that, you don't have that resource to offer your people. So the issue is less, it helps to understand there is a difference in how you relate to people and how you communicate with people. But it's more important that you're able to connect the dots of what do I need to do to get this done for my people, for my team. That's what I was trying to get at, is that there are differences. But it is very important when you start this. I tried to bring this up where we were talking about communication, because the next step in communication is relationship. And there is a huge body of research that says, here's a shocker, women are different in the way they maintain and develop relationships. But women, when they think about networking, when they think about relationships, even at the most senior levels, tend to think first of family and friends. But the more successful ones, if you take that top senior vice president up, are much better at developing, we call it networking, but it's a different type of relationship and different numbers of relationships. And it's a very important skill if you're going to be a leader, to be able to be adaptable and apply the right type of relationship to the right situation so that you can get things done.